Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing a recently finished knitting project with you. I want to talk a little bit about the pattern and talk about the yarn. As part of my knitting plans for this winter, I wanted to make a couple of sweaters and I have finished the first of my plans, and that is the Amy sweater by Petite Knit. Now, if you are a knitter yourself, I'm sure that you've heard of Petite Knit. She is probably one of, if not the most popular, well-known knitting pattern designers. And the Amy sweater is a semi-recent pattern that she has released. It's been very well received. A lot of people have made it over on Instagram, and a couple of details that really drew me to this particular sweater design were the high rolled neck. I love the raglan shaping. This is a really good beginner-friendly project because there's no short rows. It's just a really basic top-down knit in the round raglan design, but it has some elevated details that I think make it really unique and really special and convinced me that I wanted to knit one for myself. So the suggested yarn for the pattern is Sandnes Garn Peer Gynt, and this is a yarn that I hadn't used before, but I did purchase to knit this sweater. So this was my first time using Peer Gynt, and I'm going to talk about the yarn in a little bit more depth in a minute. So I did use the suggested yarn, which is Peer Gynt, and the color that I chose is called Blue Melange. Let's see here. It's a really pretty kind of textured, heathered blue, and I really love this particular shade of blue. I think it suits my features really well, and I like a soft sort of gray blue. I think it's really, really pretty. 50 grams is 91 meters, so I would consider this like a lighter worsted weight yarn, and I chose to knit the size small based on my bust measurements, and it suggested 13 skeins. I do have one and a little bit extra left over, so I was able to knit the sweater to pattern with about 12 of these. So I'll go ahead and show you my Amy sweater. As you can see, it's got a really nice kind of rolled hem feature at the neck, but also at the cuff and then at the bottom of the sweater as well. And as I said, it's got raglan shaping here, some really pretty details at the neckline. And overall, I'm very, very pleased with the sweater. I will make sure to insert some clips of me wearing it as well. I used a 4mm needle or US 6 for the body and a 3.5mm or US 4 for the ribbing at the cuffs, the bottom of the sweater, and the neck. And I'm really pleased with the collar or the neck shape. It sits really wide and away from the neck, so it doesn't feel like it's too stuffy or tight up around your skin, which is nice. I will say that the yarn itself it's definitely a more woolly yarn. It's a Norwegian wool, and I think if you have any sensitivity to wool or scratchiness, maybe you might not want this right up on your neck. For me, I think it's fine. There's a little bit of a wooliness, a little bit of a texture to it, but I don't mind wearing it next to skin. However, I do want to note that this is definitely not the softest yarn that I've ever worked with. And a little bit more about the yarn. Okay, so as I mentioned, Petite Knit is a very, very well-known knitwear designer. A lot of people have knit her patterns. She has a huge library of patterns, both for women and men and children. Lots of patterns available. They're well written. I understand why they're popular. I have knit several of them myself. And a yarn that she often uses is the Sandnes garn Peer Gynt. She also has a line of Peer Gynt where she has like designed colors with them to correspond with her sweaters. So it's a yarn that she uses a lot and that she suggests often to be used for her knitting patterns. So I know in a lot of other parts of the world, I'm in the US, it's a very easy to find and affordable yarn. I will say that purchasing from the United States, it's a little bit more expensive. On average, I found about like $8 to $10 a skein, depending on the color. I can put some images here. I know Mother Knitter has $8.50 skeins, but I ended up purchasing mine from Linda Hobby, which first time I've ordered from them before, and I was able to get it a little bit less. I think it was just under $7 US. So the total cost of my Amy sweater was around $90. And again, I knit the size small. I did purchase 13 skeins and I only needed 12, which is interesting because it suggested 13 for my size and I didn't make any modifications to the pattern. Aside from, I did knit the raglan increases here. I stopped at the number of increases for the extra small, and to be completely honest, I did that mostly because my needles were getting incredibly full. My circular needle length, the stitches were really, really tightly stuffed onto the needle, and from looking at the depth of the raglan here, I knew that the extra small would be plenty oversized and I'd have plenty of room. So that aside, I did have more than a skein left over, but I spent around $90 for this sweater, which you can easily spend a lot more on wool for a sweater, but typically I spend around $40 to $50. I've definitely spent less. I've made a sweater for $30 US, all the way up to this probably honestly is my most expensive sweater to date, which I think is really worth noting because a lot of people talk about Peer Gynt as an affordable yarn option, but this is probably my most expensive sweater yet, and I've knit a lot of sweaters. I found a lot of really good affordable wools that get me around that like $40 mark pretty often for a sweater for my size. So that's something to take into account. Um, if you're in the United States and you're looking for an affordable wool that's a similar weight to this, there are many, many other options. I know a lot of people have knit with knit picks before, and honestly, I would say that the weight and the color selection is very similar, and I think it's a little bit softer. I have a whole video actually where I talk about affordable wool yarns, and I can link that below. Um, but yeah, I was a little bit surprised given the cost that it's not super soft. It was fine to work with. I think the stitch definition is really great, but I will say that ordering from Linda Hobby was an interesting experience. So it was the cheapest that I could find the Peer Gynt yarn, which is why I decided to try it. And I also ordered some drops Lima at the same time. And I plan to knit another sweater with that, so I can talk about that in a future video. But what I will say is it was very inexpensive and it arrived very quickly. I think it took less than a week, maybe 4 or 5 days to get to me, and I started knitting with it right away. And unfortunately, as I was knitting out of the skein, I think I was almost done with the raglan increases. The yarn that came onto my needles had a worm on it, a small white worm, and I don't do very well with bugs. Um, yeah, I didn't react very well, and I got rid of the worm, and then I started to research like what this could possibly be, and I came across some images of moth larva. And then I really started to freak out because I have never had moths before. I keep all of my hand knits in a closed door cabinet, and I have little cedar pieces, and I'm always really careful to wash my knitwear before I store it long term. And all of my yarn is stored really safely in Ziploc bags inside of a plastic tub. Like, I'm really, really careful because I don't want my knitwear or my yarn to get destroyed, and I've never had any issues with moths. So I was really upset to find a worm in my yarn, and I had only had this yarn at my house for maybe like 4 days. So I knew that the the amount of time it would take a moth to lay an egg and have it um, hatch into a worm and then grow to a size that it was when I found it, I do not believe that it came from my house. So I reached out to the company, to Linda Hobby, and the email that I got back was basically, we have no moths here. So take that for what you will. They did refund me one skein. So I will say that the way that the yarn was shipped to me, it was in a mailer bag, like the thin plastic bag, and then the yarn itself was not in an additional bag. Sometimes when you order yarn, it's in a sealed plastic bag and then that goes into the mailer. This was just all of the yarn inside of one of those thin mailer bags, and I did find a little tear in the bag before I opened it. So I suppose there's a possibility that in shipping, something got into the yarn. I don't know if it could hatch that quickly, but yeah, it was pretty upsetting. So I reached out to you guys on Instagram on my stories, and I got a lot of suggestions for what to do. The majority of people said to freeze the wool. So I was really, really thankful that I hadn't put this package of wool into that tub with all of my other yarns, because then everything would have been contaminated. But for whatever reason, I still had it in the bag that it was all shipped to me in. So I put my project on the needles in a Ziploc, and then all of the other skeins of yarn in Ziplocs in the deep freezer in our garage. Thankfully, we have one of those. And so I kept it in there for over a week, and then I took it out for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days maybe, and let it warm up again, and then I put it back in the freezer. And I did that a couple times because I was really concerned that is the possibility of finding more eggs and different life cycles of the moth larva, and I really wanted to ensure that if there was anything else in the yarn, that it was taken care of before I brought it back out to work on it. And so, yeah, the project was put on hold for a few weeks because of that cycle of freezing and warming up. I did get a few suggestions to put the yarn in the oven and to put it on the lowest oven temperature for a couple hours, and that would ensure that any eggs or larvae would be killed. However, as I was doing the raglan increases, I had a lot of stitch markers and the needles themselves to mark all of the different increases for the raglan, and I really didn't want to lose all of that or take it all apart and try to mark it with scrap yarns, and it felt a bit fiddly. Also, I was really grossed out and I didn't want to handle it a lot after finding that worm. So I put it in the freezer and thankfully I have not found anything else. I haven't found any other signs of activity or life, which is great. And I finished the sweater, and then I've been working with the drops Lima that I also purchased. And again, everything seems clean, which is good. So I don't know if the company that I ordered from is to blame. I don't know if it could have happened during the shipping time. It was a really short window. It was like 4 or 5 days from ordering it to receiving it. So it's not like it sat somewhere for weeks in the mail. But yeah, that was pretty upsetting. So yeah, I don't know that I would order from them again, just because I definitely don't want to invite bugs into my house. And while it was really, really cheap and it did get to me quickly, you never want to find a worm in yarn that you just purchased. Also, I know for some people, spending around $90 or $100 on a sweater is not a big deal, but for me, this is like the most expensive yarn that I've ever purchased. Um, and I think that's just because of location, because I have spent less on yarns that I would prefer to knit with and to wear. So I'm glad that I've worked with it. I think that because of the popularity of Petite knit and her patterns, I think Sandnes Garn and Peer Gynt has gotten a lot of popularity or is often used because of Petite knit and their collaborations, and it's fine. It's like, honestly, I would compare it most to like the wool of the Andes worsted, which is a light worsted weight yarn. And it's a woolly yarn. It's Peruvian Highland wool, whereas this is Norwegian wool, but I would say that it's very, very comparable in the quality, and it might be a little bit softer. And also, I think it's like less than half the cost. It's very, very affordable. So if you're in the US and you're looking for a Pure Gynt alternative, Cascade 220 is also great. As I said, I have a whole video about affordable wool yarns that I can link below. But all of that to say, I really, really do love the sweater. I love the color. As I said, it's very comfortable for me to wear. I don't find it to be itchy, but it is definitely a more woolly texture. So yeah, I'll insert some clips and I can try it on here for you too. I will note that I don't hang my knitwear, I fold it. This is just for ease of showing you today. As you can see, it's very cozy. I love the big neckline. I love that it's not tight in any way. It doesn't feel restrictive. As I said, it doesn't feel itchy. It's just a little bit woolly, but it's very, very cozy. And it did work up really quickly if you don't take into account the couple of weeks where I put it on pause to make sure that everything was clean. Um, I think you could easily knit this sweater in less than a month, which is a really quick turnaround for a hand knit sweater. That's probably in part the gauge, but also the raglan construction is really simple, and I think this would be a great sweater for a beginner. So if you've knit maybe like a scarf or a hat and you're interested in trying out a sweater pattern, I really, really like this one. I think that the oversized fit and the construction and everything make it something that you can knit very successfully as a beginner. I have a few other sweaters that I plan to knit this winter season, and I will be sure to share those with you as I complete them. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I hope that you're all doing really well. And if you're celebrating the holidays soon, I hope that that's a really enjoyable time for you and your families as well. I look forward to chatting with you very soon in the next one. Bye.